Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about this very slight delay in the start. So we have any apologies, please? Councillor Graves. Any others? Okay. Any late items? I don't have any. No petitions, as far as I know. No. Urgent items? None. Declarations of interest? None. Minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of August 2019. Thank you. Item 7, recommendations from Executive Scrutiny Board. It's okay with you. We'll do the same as normal and deal with them by item, if that's okay. Recommendation for Corporate Parenting Committee for, or is it from Corporate Parenting Committee? Item 8. Children in Care Council update. Yes, Yvonne.
Thank you. Yes, as many of you know, we have a corporate parenting board, which the Children in Care Council do sit on. And the Children in Care Council members also are part of the Voices in Action forum, which is our young people's forum. What the Children in Care Council have asked us to do, which I have absolutely no problem with doing, is to be part of any consultation that we carry out as a council. Currently, we use the Voices in Action forum group, which, as I said, does have Children in Care Council members on it. But what they are saying, in essence, is that Children in Care Council do have a different point of view, sometimes that would be quite different to those that might come out in the Voices in Action consultation. So in effect, they're asking us to have a separate consultation for the Children in Care Council, which I absolutely would recommend to Council to do, or Cabinet.
Chair, Chair, could I propose that item 20, just on a one-off occasion, is moved forward? We've got an officer who is feeding back to us on this one, and it would be appropriate, as she's only got one item, to move that to the first of the agenda, if possible, please. No, Chair, I'd love to deal with it prior to item 9 as a 8A, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I do appreciate this as a one-off. Thank you very much. What this report does do is further to the approval of the council plan and the council delivery plan back in July. This presents an updated performance framework. So it sets out what we will monitor over the next 12 months in reporting back to Cabinet and the wider public about the outcomes contained in the council plan and delivery plan. The key changes from last year are, first of all, it has been aligned with the new themes of the council plan. So they are a city with big ambitions, a city of health and happiness, and a council focused on the things that matter. The other key change from last year is that we have more prominently shown which projects and also which risks are associated with those themes, and try to link that with performance measures in a more holistic way. Appendix 1 sets out the proposed framework, and Appendix 2 sets out the proposed targets for performance measures, which is in the same way as we have done in previous years. So subject to Cabinet approval, we will obviously start monitoring this as soon as possible and present the Q1 report at the next Cabinet in October. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Corporate Executive Scrutiny looked at it last night and resolved to note the report. Any comments, questions from the panel? Yes.
I think my memory serves me correctly in that the sort of table, as it were, or diagram, infographic, whatever you want to call it, at 4.3 was supposed to have an extra addition. I think it was under the City of Health and Happiness about the eco climate change issues, and there was supposed to be some words added in, I believe, probably the last but one cabinet agreed that. I don't really see it here.
Yeah, what we did do is we built that into the how you will measure success, which can be shown in the council plan. So whilst whilst it doesn't feature into the diagram, if you actually look, I think it's about page 6 or 7 of the council plan, you can see that. So it certainly was reflected, and it is also included in the council delivery plan.
I'm still sure that it was actually agreed by Cabinet to actually put it into the infographic, though.
Just to give you assurances, Ruth, there's no intention to have it omitted anywhere. I don't think it needs to be in that infographic, but if there's a way to do that in the future to ensure that you're confident, as everyone else is, that it is adopted, we'll definitely make that change. But I can assure you that it is in the council forward plan and the plan.
Thanks, Chair. I think if we can look at the recommendations from the scrutiny board, that they recommended that the initial review and the new arrangements of the safeguarding partnership planned for December this year be presented back to Children and Young People's Scrutiny Board at a further date and reported to other boards as ongoing work. We have absolutely no problem with that at all, and in fact it's nice to see that scrutiny are in fact showing an interest in safeguarding children. So if I may, Chair, recommend that the Cabinet accept the Exec Scrutiny's recommendation there.
Oh, there are some recommendations there. Sorry, yes, there are 3 recommendations, 2.1 to 2.3. They weren't on the front page. We can agree those? Agree. Thank you. Item 10 then is changes to the single discretionary award scheme. And just for information, the Exec Scrutiny saw that last night and resolved to note the report. Thank you. Who's going to lead on this one?
Chair, just to present, obviously in terms of presenting this, Simon can give some further detail and clarity just from a member's point of view and a cabinet member point of view. It is, as it is a consultation, there are lots of elements to go into play with this as it stands, and I think in terms of where we're at with moving this forward, it's the right thing to do the consultation, get feedback from those potential people impacted by it, and to get feedback into feeding where we go with this in the future. So in terms of that, I'm sure that Simon could give you a little more detail, should we need it any further.
Thank you. Questions, thoughts, observations? Yes.
There was actually a recommendation, although I wasn't able to be at Exec Scrutiny last night, there was a recommendation that wasn't passed by Exec Scrutiny, which was somewhat disappointing, which was, I mean, firstly, there were concerns raised about the length of the consultation period being only 6 weeks, although the reasoning in the report is that that's because there is a specific group of people who are being asked, although I still don't necessarily think that it's a long enough, 6-week consultation is a long enough consultation period, but there was a recommendation from Executive Scrutiny that we ask the direct question in the consultation, you know, do respondents, do people being consulted agree with the changes to the proposal? That was, however, rejected. It seems to me a bit disconcerting. We should be confident in asking the direct question to the people that we're consulting as to whether or not they agree with the proposed changes, and I'd like Cabinet to consider that again, even though Executive Scrutiny didn't agree with that recommendation.
So we had no recommendations, but we've got a request from Councillor Eldred to consider that question. Thoughts?
Apologies, Chair. I was just speaking to Simon in relation to this. I think the consultation is detailed. It is open and clear as to what the proposals are within there. From a point of view as to whether we specifically ask a specific question in depth in line with that, I think I need to take feedback from Simon as to the need or the clarity around putting that through.
Thank you. The policy is for 2016 policy, and this is just amending a couple of aspects to it. It is an integrated policy that is designed to be delivered within the awards, within the affordability, and the triggers and the taper and everything else which is being proposed here is about still applying the principles of the policy, but obviously changing those triggers to reflect the affordability. If, when the consultation finishes, and it's partly the reason for the 6-week consultation, is we should have a local government finance settlement in December, so when it comes back to you as part of a budget process in Q4, then we can have a look at that. But so it was felt that we don't have to ask it as part of this consultation of whether people feel they want it or not.
Okay, Councillor Barker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've heard what Councillor Eldridge said. I find it very difficult that when we have a department here that puts together consultation documents who are very skilled at it, and the idea of that department, those people, is to ensure that the questions are fair and neutral. I find it very difficult to accept that we should put in a direct question which clearly isn't going to be neutral, and so therefore gives a skewed view from the people who are responding. I've been involved in quite a few consultations over the last few years in relation to this council, and all of them go through this sort of scientific process, and at the end of the day, the results of which cannot be questioned because they are totally neutral questions and they are not loaded. And so therefore I would not particularly like to see any on the hoof change to the consultation that's gone out.
Okay, well, from my point of view, I don't see any reason why we would need to do this. Any consultation gives the consultee the opportunity to say what they think about the question, the subject they're being asked about. So they have every opportunity, Lisa, to say, no, I don't want to do this. So do you want to come back on the recommendation that wasn't? Yeah?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, okay, if we're asking people whether or not they agree with the proposal is not loaded, it is neutral, so I think it's unreasonable to say that. But let's be clear about this. I'm sorry, this is not about a routine change to this policy from 2016. This is about finding money because of a reduction in the money that we're getting from government to fund this payment. So I think it's a little bit, given the report states clearly that the reason for to putting these proposals forward is because of reduction in funding from government. Let's be honest about that and open about it, that's the reason why this is happening. And I do think, you know, asking people who are being consulted a direct question about whether or not they would agree with these proposals is entirely appropriate.
Okay, well, obviously we shouldn't try and preempt the results of the consultation or the report itself, so we know what you're saying, we'll take that forward. Did you want to?
Just very quickly, Chair, the whole purpose of public consultation is to receive those views, and obviously Councillor Eldred and her colleagues in scrutiny, if they're unhappy that it wasn't agreed, then they can quite clearly put those views forward as part of the consultation. In terms of 4.1, the background to this and the reasons why it's been this report's before us is in black and white there. It's not pink papers, it's in public domain, so it actually clearly states the situation as to what the background and the reasoning is taking it to consultation, so it's there already.
Okay, so we've got 3 recommendations, 2.1 to 2.3, and actually, oh sorry Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to raise the point. Obviously, it may well be that it's not a large number of people that are being involved, but for them, it is probably going to be quite devastating. I trust that an EIA will be carried out as part of this process, and that obviously mitigation will be put in place to help these people in some way, shape or form, either with other partners that the council has. We can't just sort of wash our hands of people just because the government decides they're going to give us less money. We still should be making some arrangements as far as possible to mitigate these effects on these people.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, I mean, we can't preempt the consultation and the outcome of it because we don't know what concerns people are going to raise. But reassurance in relation to impact assessment 4.7, it's in the paper. Yes, of course, we'll do that. And it's referred to in a number of other paragraphs in the paper. So, yes, Councillor Ross.
Just in relation to in a whole, absolutely. As you look at 9.1 on the report, Ruth, it will pick up the equalities impact assessment. What we want to be clear on is that we're not taking anything in terms of the numbers of people we want to help. It's been a successful scheme, 86% successful in terms of supporting individuals to get them back into a better financial situation. It's the removal of the second 3-month award. What we want to do is to encourage those, and what we can do with funding within the council is to support those individuals away from the need for the second 3-month reward, if you like. My whole aim is to make sure that they don't need that going forward, that we can support them into a better position and give them the hand up in terms of making sure they've got the viability to do that. But where, as always, with all of these elements, there will be an element of further discretion in terms of those that come into priority groups and that we need to support. And within that, we will always aim to support those in the highest needs. And I think that's clear that, you know, this isn't a quick fix. It is purely trying to identify those that are in need and working with them in a more proactive way to support them into being no longer in need of a single discretionary award scheme.
Okay, and the report has already picked out some priority groups, i.e. foster carers, people with disabilities, and so on. So we'll deal with the outcome of the consultation when that comes. Any other queries? So we've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. They agreed? Agreed. Item 11 then is Derby City Jonathan's skid resistance policy. I think you're going to deal with this, Mr. Kinsey, are you?
Thanks, Chair. Just for my clarification, do we deal with the recommendation that came from scrutiny last night first, or is it presentation of the Cabinet report? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the recommendation from scrutiny last night, I agree we should be looking at skid resistance on cycleways and footways. However, it would be difficult at the current time for the following reasons. The legislation covering highways is the Highways Act 1980, and this imposes a statutory duty on the authority but does not tell us how to discharge it. So from that, the Department for Transport produce guidance documents via the UK Roads Liaison Group that give guidance to authorities as to how to implement the Highways Act. And there are a number of subgroups that put this guidance together. There's one on winter research, there's one on footways and cycleways. And these subgroups provide much of the guidance for use across the sector and often in conjunction with Transport Research Laboratory. The groups are made up from local authority representatives, Highways England representatives, Transport Scotland, etc., etc. And currently there's been no guidance given on skid resistance on footways or cycleways. So we want to recommend that the recommendation isn't accepted because we have no benchmark to work with when we're putting this together. Nothing has been through an approval process within the highway sector. And in the event of any third-party claims, this would leave the council wide open because we would have come up with our own policy and procedures without having that backup to the documentation to back it up with. In addition to that, within the council, within Derby City Highways, we don't have the expertise or the resources to produce such guidance and documentation. But there could be something positive we offer in this, in that the Footway and Cycleway Management Group that I mentioned that do form part of UK Roads Liaison Group. I happen to be chair of that group at the moment. And in our business plan, we do have an item that looks at skid resistance for footways and cycleways. So there is an opportunity for us to perhaps work with other local authorities to produce this guidance, which could then come back to Cabinet at a later date as a policy for dealing with skid resistance issues in footways and cycleways. So at the moment saying we don't accept the recommendation, but there is potentially a way forward for the future.
Thank you. So your recommendation is not to accept the recommendations in the absence of formal guidelines because of the potential ramifications of that, subject to that your opportunity to look at it and come back to us. Can I just clarify, David, if there was a particular area or a particular stretch of cycleway that somebody considered dangerous, it could be subject to assessment, same as any part of the highway or whatever?
Yeah, by all means, we've got examples currently in the city where there are issues with the type of paving and trees that are nearby where we have slipping issues, and that's been highlighted and is already subjected to an enhanced cleaning regime.
So we'll deal with any concerns around it in the normal highways scheme of things.
Exactly,
and
yes.
deal with it as a risk. Okay. Yeah.
Just one thing that I think I'd see clarity on for everybody's benefit is when we talk about highways, obviously off-road cycle pedestrians, one thing. Where you've got, say, Uttoxeter Road, for example, we've got a long stretch of on-highway cycle lane. So can we just clarify whether that is classed as highway or is that what we're so just for the benefit of everybody.
So yeah, apologies. We highway maintenance professionals do like to get wrapped up in terminology and acronyms. So yeah, when we talk about highway, we talk about from boundary to boundary. So that includes the footways and the carriageways. In terms of cycleways that do form part of the carriageway, this current skid resistance policy that we're bringing forward only looks at the carriageway part of that. It isn't taking cycleways into account. Okay.
Any more queries, questions on that? We have two recommendations then, 2.1 and 2.2. Mr. Smale, yes.
Sorry, Chair.
You just got in.
No, me and David had some extensive conversations over this today, and obviously we understand this recommendation came from Councillor Kerr. As mentioned by Dave, that obviously we can't do it because obviously there's no benchmark, and obviously leads the door for potential cases made against the council should these come forward. But it's encouraging to know, obviously, if you've just all heard that Dave's a part of the chair of one of the groups that will be able to look into this kind of policy moving forward. So we will not rule out that eventuality. And also just to thank Dave for this work. I think this kind of policy and work frame has been going on for quite some time, but it's actually just been made into, you could say, statute into the council, because we have been applying these policies for the last 10 years, but now it's finally come to Cabinet at the request of the DFT. So just want to thank Dave and the team for their hard work again.
Okay, I'm sure Mr. Kinsey is delighted to have sorted your skid problems out today. So with that, we'll accept 2.1 to 2.1 and 2.2. Thank you. And that takes us on then to item 12, which is your resilient issues, Jonathan. Mr. Kinsey, are you going to deal with these as well for him?
Yes, Chair, I'll take this one. Excuse me, I'll take this one as well.
I think these were noted by the exec board last night with no recommendations.
Yeah, no recommendations. So Okay, so the Resilient Network has been unofficially in place for many years in the form of the winter gritting networks. But following 2 recommendations from the Department for Transport, we now need to formalise a Resilient Network. And this follows on from some of the recent severe winters where we've suffered from national salt shortages and more recently flooding events. The key differences from the winter gritting network is that all weather events are considered and it's a smaller network. This on the basis that we are talking about extreme weather events. So not just normal winter weather, but extreme winter weather or flooding or heat or wind. So the routes that form part of the Resilient Network are of vital economic and social importance, and the report seeks to ensure they are maintained and, where appropriate, enhanced to a high standard in order to mitigate the effects of extreme weather. This will also tie in with the authority's approach to asset management, in prioritising resources in the correct locations at the correct times. A resilient network is a much narrower definition than that used to prioritise general network maintenance. It's the minimum network to maintain economic activity in the city. So the adoption of the resilient network will facilitate a more efficient and responsive highway service that works with our key partners to maintain key routes and manage public expectations. And this is the minimum we will endeavour to keep open during these extreme events and covers all aspects of key infrastructure and services. It's been put together with input from stakeholders as detailed in Appendix 2. And finally, during extreme weather, the highway maintenance team have to prioritise their resources and deal with calls for assistance from members of the public. And again, having this published will help us to manage that public expectation and also the demand as well. There are no financial implications as part of the report because these will be dealt with within existing budgets, and there are no legal implications either. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, and thank you for the detail as usual in the report. It leaves no stone unturned, as they say. Any comments, questions? Jonathan.
Yep, just to say thanks again to Dave and the team for another policy that's come forward that is again set in stone. Obviously, Dave and his team have been working quite extensively in the last 18 months to 24 months on new policies coming forward with regards to our highway network. And I think we're starting to see some significant progress in our asset management now. And then moving forward, obviously, I just want to talk about that. There was some discussions last night with regards to how that we are now assessed at Band 3 authority on the incentive fund, which shows the progress we're making, and also that obviously capital funding provided by the Department for Transport is maintained at an optimum level. We will always continue to lobby the Department for Transport for more funding for our road networks, and hopefully in the coming years we'll be in a better position into maintaining our road network. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In the absence of any other comments, we've got recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 then. Agreed? Thank you. Item 14 then is expanding fostering... Have we got 13, is it? Oh, it is 13. Item 13, expanding fostering provision. Yes.
Chair, I'm requesting a pilot scheme on behalf of adults and children, and this is to enable foster carers or potential foster carers who have not got suitable accommodation for young people to be left within their care. So this would be a scheme that would allow joint ownership, shared ownership, ownership under licence, or just rented properties that Derby Homes will either purchase or make available from the current accommodation to assist potential foster carers in meeting accommodation needs. If this pilot works, then we will be exceedingly happy because it will help children's services, and I'm sure Councillor Williams will be extolling the benefits of foster carers to children's services.
What a good idea. So, yes, thank you to Councillor Webb. You'll hear a lot in the coming months, years, might I say, about co-production. And this is a really good example of co-production where myself and Councillor Webb have worked together with the teams from the Derby Homes, the Housing Revenue team and the Children Young People team. This is a really exciting pilot and we should be excited about it. You know, we know that government ministers are excited about it and they're interested in seeing how it operates. But for me, this is about using common sense where we have got an asset, i.e. our houses and our foster carers who need each other to progress, that we break down the barriers and we make sure that they can work together and have what they need. And again, I will open this back out to everybody and to challenge all my fellow councillors, whether you're in the cabinet or not, if you know of anybody that would like to be a foster carer for Derby City Council and to look after our children, if you have a spare bedroom and some love, come forward and we'd really like to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Yes, Ruth.
Scanning through, I haven't actually seen, is this sort of a first, or are we sort of copying what someone else has done in other parts of the country?
As far as we're aware, this is a first of this type of scheme. So, you know, something that Derby's really good at is coming first, and we like to continue that. There will be other schemes for carers and for unaccompanied asylum seekers coming forward. So we have several similar projects that we would like to develop. So this is the first of several that I would like to bring to Cabinet. Not I, we would like to bring to Cabinet.
And it's actually what first one on tonight's agenda of initiatives to deal with and deal with the housing issues that we have in the city, and we're tackling on a proactive basis. So we have 2 recommendations. No, we have 3 recommendations, 4 even, and we have a note from the Executive Scrutiny Board last night. Are you okay with those? Thank you. Item 14 then, Castle Ward, next steps. Greg.
Chair, thank you. Well, we do have some more good news here, because we have fortunately been able to capture some additional external public funding with the help of Homes England. We would like to acknowledge their support and help, which will unlock the next phase or phases of this scheme. And just briefly to recap, Castle Ward is, of course, one of the Council's strategic priorities, has been for some time. We have made some great progress. Phase 1 is complete. The boulevard, which really links properly the station to the city centre, is in place. Phase 2 is on site. But to progress further on Castle Ward, or much further, and also really to help fully build out the nearby DRI housing site, which is consented, we do need to build a new primary school in the area. Now, we ran into problems, some which surfaced some weeks ago, in that the costs for the school were higher than anticipated, and that was because for 2 reasons. The main reason was that we recognised we needed to build a form and a half school rather than a single form entry school, and that was to allow give us enough headroom for children coming from the DRI area, which had been consented. And the other thing is that when we reviewed the project, we thought we need to put more in for site abnormal, to a substantial sum. We put a further £1 million into the project. And the reason for that, it's a brownfield site, of course. We'd already had contingencies in. But when you look at the site in more detail, it's formerly terrace houses with little workshops and yards at the back. And it's very difficult to predict through site investigations exactly what the issues are when those houses were built. Some of those workshops might have been dye workshops, for example, with awful chemicals. Others were fairly benign. But so we have given ourselves a significant contingency. Clearly, we won't use that if it's not necessary. If it's not necessary, it can then be reinvested back into council priorities. So we had a problem. We had a funding gap of about 3 million. We have now resolved that with additional funding from Homes England. And just very briefly, page 9, table 2 just gives a summary of how we're funding that school, which is now projected at £8 million, including the extra £1 million contingency. And so Homes England are allowing to spend £4.5 million on the school, which is fantastic. Originally there was 0 on it. So that's £3 million extra plus £1.5 million, which was for land acquisition. We had some LGF money from the local economic partnership. So again, thank you to them, and they've approved it can be used for this. We'd already had some funding, £500,000 in our budgets, in our plans for that, and there was some predicted a small level of receipts. In addition, there were some 106 payments coming from a number of developers, including Castlewood and the DRI site. Clearly, those payments come in over a period of time. We build the school up front, and as those payments come in, they pay that off. In fact, the table doesn't show the full amount of payments. It only goes up to, I think it's 24, 25, and there's a significant level of additional payments will come in, which in a sense is a further contingency for the council. So it's a very positive position. We now have a solution to this, and I think rather than where we were a few weeks ago, feeling that the Castlewood pack of cards was come down, we can progress with this project. Recommendations 2.1 to 2.8 all refer to the school. They're the specific recommendations necessary to enact this. They put the £8 million on the capital plan, approve amendments to the funding agreements, etc. We can go into those if need be. There are two further recommendations to the report, 2.9, 2.10, and they relate to land acquisition. Because we're using part of the Homes England money, we've switched that from land acquisition towards the school, about £1.5 million. We're backfilling that using unring fence right to buy receipts. In addition, we felt it's prudent at this point to seek to acquire a number of homes through the HRA to be managed by Derby Homes, up to 40 homes. So, Chair, I think this is a really positive turnaround. Would like to thank Homes England for their support, and we recommend this to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Just an observation firstly, it is a very, very important scheme to the city. This afternoon I walked from the railway station back here, and the difference is 100% different. The walk down there already, when it's completed, it will make a massive difference in the development of a community down there, which is certainly much required for the city. Thank you for the hard work in repairing that gap in the funding, and thank you to Homes England. Yvonne, I think you indicated you wanted to speak. I will read them now then, so we can get them aired. The first one was to recommend to Council Cabinet that the design of the school allows for its expansion up to a two-form entry, which is the Council's preferred size for primary schools, and to recommend to Cabinet that the design of the streets close to the site will be reviewed to ensure they are friendly as possible for families and children walking or cycling to school. Those were the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So whilst two-form entry schools, which is 420 places, do offer some advantages over a one-point form entry of school, which is 315 places, in terms of classroom organisation, the priority is to actually align the school capacity to the anticipated demand. So this is to avoid overcapacity in the system, which could have a destabilising effect on other local schools. It's more important to match the provision in a defined area to the need rather than to achieve arbitrary target number in school. So in a nutshell, the team have had a look at this, analysed the numbers, and have said yes, it would be more prudent to go up from one form to 1.5 form entry, but not to go to two form, because actually what that would mean was there's over provision of numbers in the area. You then start looking at things like shutting other schools, which we do not want to do in this case. So whilst I understand the reasonings for the recommendation of number one from the executive scrutiny, I would have to say, in terms of all the analytical design that's gone behind this, that I would turn that down at the moment. And whilst you might say that it is the council's preferred size for primary, yes, it is the council's preferred size for primary schools. However, that comes with a whole number of other items underneath. So that's in a perfect scenario side. In this scenario, that doesn't fit. So I would ask Cabinet to go with the 1.5 entry form. I can't answer item number 2, not my area.
Okay, so in terms of number 2 and the design in the streets, I think I can anticipate the answer, but Greg?
Chair, there'll be a transport plan with a planning application. It will be considered at length by colleagues from education.
And actually, the design of the streets is pretty much set. The layout of the streets is pretty much set.
Well, the whole boulevard
is
is designed as a very, very pedestrian and cycle-friendly scheme.
But we can note that recommendation and consider it
of
when it
course.
comes to the designs around the school, yeah?
Of course, Chair, yes.
Okay. I think Councillor Holmes was next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate what's been said already about, clearly there were significant challenges with this, and I would personally like to thank Greg and his team for the efforts that they made and the work that they put in to bring this forward. There were times when we wondered whether we would be able to do this, and I'm absolutely delighted that it's here now and we're moving forward with it. And obviously Homes England as well, the collaboration with them is very welcome, and I'd like to thank them too. I remember 2010, 11, phase 1, we were in administration then, and I remember doing some press on the actual site as was, and it just shows you actually that how the city can be transformed in a relatively short period of time, all things considered, and I'm delighted that this is moving forward for the next phase. It's much needed. The report obviously spells out that. There's a great paragraph actually in 4.1 which gives you a very brief example of how important this site is currently and how important it will be moving forward. I'm sure Councillor Webb will echo these words that it's going to deliver not just a much needed school, but also much needed affordable housing as well, which is very welcome. It ticks all the boxes for me, Chair. I very much look forward to hopefully the Cabinet agreeing this and we can move forward and regenerate and complete the project.
Okay, so being as Councillor Webb indicated, we can find out if he thinks that.
Well, I agree with what Councillor Holmes has said. I'd like to thank Greg and his team, but most of all, I'd like to thank Homes England for making this contribution so that the school is available, which opens up potential for 840 dwellings in Castle Ward and a potential of 800 dwellings on the DRI site. So that will give us inner city living, and I would like to wholly recommend recommendation 210 so that I'm allowed to purchase some affordable housing through the HRA so that we can meet some of our affordable housing needs across the city. It doesn't seem like 4 weeks ago that we had the Housing Minister touring Castle Ward with a representative from Homes England for the East Midlands, a very successful visit, and the Cabinet Minister will be coming back to see us very shortly as he's interested in other projects that we are doing throughout the city. So I'd recommend this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
He's coming tomorrow to talk trains. On the back of those comments from Cabinet, can we resolve maybe to write to Homes England expressing our combined thanks for the action that they've supported us here with? Greg? Yeah. Sorry, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. While I agree with what Councillor Williams has said about recommendation 1, I read it actually in a different light, not actually to put it straight away up to a 2-form entry, but to actually allow the possibility, with obviously the way that it's designed, where it's placed within the site, that in some point in the future, 5 years, 10 years' time, that it would be quite easy to actually add on extra classrooms. Obviously we've talked about certain developments that this particular amount of school places is going to serve, but that's by no means the only inner city housing that is being planned in the pipeline. So I think we just have to, it would be sensible to keep that as something we could do in the future if the need, well, I think it will probably be when the need arises actually. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Just a technical part on here, if I've got it correct, it's we don't have the land space to go out, we're actually going up, therefore we can't do that.
Okay, so in the absence of any other questions, in terms of the recommendations, then, just to clarify, what we're actually saying is we note the first recommendation but don't consider it to be necessary at this point. Is that right? In relation to the second recommendation, we also note that recommendation and will ensure that in due process it will be considered around the application for planning application for the school. Is that okay? So that leaves us with recommendations 2.1 to 210. We agreed? Thank you. Item 16 then is purchase.
This is, go back one. It's easy to
What's
miss.
happening here?
That's it.
Okay.
You want to
Oh, Beckett, well.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we didn't mean to cut you out of that one. I think it's calls to you, Greg, I think.
Chair, thank you. Beckett Well is, as we all know, is a hugely ambitious project to deliver the regeneration of this sort of area, which has been much neglected and subject to a significant level of market failure over many, many years. We came to Cabinet in March this year setting out a strategy and a delivery plan for the site, and broadly the strategy involves the council acquiring key elements of site, de-risking that. For example, we've acquired Debenhams and we're demolishing that shortly, and then moving on and developing it with a partnership with a private sector partner. Lots of progress on that strategy, and report 4.2 just quickly outlines it. In relation to the first couple of bullet points there, we had the developer, St James Security, who we're in partnership with, have submitted a hybrid application outline for the whole site, so comprehensive, looking at the whole site, but also detail for phase one. Phase one brings us some new homes in the city centre and a new public square. Contract awarded for demolition of Debenhams, that's due to start later this month, and we've agreed terms, indeed signed, with the developer for the sale of key elements of land. So, positive progress. Chair, this report really is a financial report. We, in that strategy, there were further parcels of key elements of land we wanted to acquire. The details in the confidential items, I can't really go into that now because those deals are not yet signed. That's why they are confidential. What it does is move elements of the funding cocktail, or should I say jigsaw, around to put us in funds at the right time in order to complete those further acquisitions, which we are hoping to do in a matter of weeks. That is achieved in part by bringing forward sales from part of the site and also some of the savings from selling the agreement we made to sell elements of the College Street site. Chair, that is achieved. What I can say, details in the financial, the pink papers, but that is achieved without seeking any additional council funding or put pressure on the medium-term financial plan. So it's moving bits of a financial jigsaw around, and that's what the report does. Thank you, Chair. I'll take what questions I can, but some of them may relate to the confidential elements.
Okay, so we got two recommendations from exec scrutiny. First one, to recommend to Council Cabinet that the high-rise elements of the new build be required to include any appropriate recommendations from the Grenfell Tower inquiry, even if these have not been transferred into building regulations, and also to recommend to Council Cabinet that sprinkler systems be required to be included in buildings within the scheme.
Chair, these are recommendations which officers would advise you not to accept Firstly, it's not in our gift. We've already signed contracts for the disposal of this land. The planning application is made by the owner, and matters such as on both of these items will be taken into account through the planning process. This report is about the finances, of course. The planning process will see what appropriate fire strategies, etc., and the building regulation process are required for this building. My advice is not to accept those recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes?
Thank you. Yeah, just to reiterate that, I think I understand the logic and the reasons for the recommendations, Scrutiny Board recommendations to Cabinet. I would recommend that we note it, and just to reiterate what Greg has said, as we take forward through the due process, such as planning process, where appropriate we can consider these things, but at this stage it wouldn't be appropriate for the Cabinet to accept those, to note. I'd recommend we note them, Chair.
And of course, it falls within the remit of the Planning Committee to deal with these things, and there'll be more than opportunity to be able to raise these again in the future. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, with my hat as Vice Chair of the Fire Authority, I am going to say something on this. It is been proven beyond all doubt that sprinklers save lives. Contrary to popular belief, they do not go off accidentally or anything like that. They need heat extreme heat to be activated. Many of you, I hope, will have seen the demonstrations that Derbyshire Fire and Rescue have done on social media. They've been put out showing 2 bedrooms, one with a sprinkler, one without, and the contrast is remarkable. Hardly any damage where you've actually got a sprinkler, and total damage obviously where you haven't. I believe now, well, it was just last week or the week before, the government have now decided upon, I think, 17 metres as the cut-off above which sprinklers will need to be fitted. If these buildings, or any of them, are above 17 metres, then that's going to have to be done. We certainly should be talking to them about that, even if the regulations have not quite come in when the planning application is, because it may well be that they're being built when the law has then been changed. So I would like that these matters are discussed with the those who are going to be doing the building and planning applications, etc. Thank you.
I think I take on board that it's not a decision for Cabinet to make. However, I think the very least that Cabinet can do is forward these recommendations to the Planning Control Committee and ask them to be taken into or to be considered when they're considering the planning, when the full planning application, which I believe is this week.
I'll do what I can as the Cabinet member responsible for planning to ensure that happens. We can have those discussions. As said, it's not that we disagree at all with what you're saying here. It's actually valid. What we're saying here is that we, as a Cabinet, can't accept these specific recommendations in this context. So I'll do what I can to ensure that that's the case.
Just to reiterate that, the recommendation is to require us, for us to require it. We haven't got that ability to do at this stage. As you point out, Lisa, it's not a Cabinet place to do that in this case, but we're not at odds with you on any of this, and I'm sure the recommendation will be noted and dealt with in the normal process of the planning application. Is it this week? It's in this week's.
Let me see what I can do. I'll have to do a week ahead of planning.
Okay. So, subject to that, on the actual paper, we have 2 recommendations, 2.1 and 2.2. Is that okay? Item 16 then now, purchase of a residential development to provide 14 new affordable homes. Yes, Councillor Webb.
Oh. Right, now I'm switched on. Can I recommend that we adopt this with a slight amendment because I'm feeling left out on recommendation 2.2 as a delegated authority. So in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Adults, Health and Housing, Director of Communities and Place and Strategic Director for Corporate Resources. This again is good news. We've been given the opportunity of purchasing 14 new build homes, and they are 4 2-bedroom bungalows, 4 2-bedroom houses, 6 3-bedroom houses, and the affordable 2-bedroom properties. There is currently a waiting list of around 1,600 people for this type of letting through Derby Homes. It's all being done through the HRA and the right to buy receipts. As you know, if we don't spend the right to buy receipts, the money goes back to the government and we don't see it. So I'd like to spend as much as possible to ensure we give the government nothing, even though we're asking them for funding elsewhere. So it's, as I say, a good news story, and with that amendment, I would recommend 2.1 to 2.3.
Okay, the exec scrutiny resolved to note the report. Can I just ask, Roy, we've got half an eye on trying to acquire as many larger houses as possible, 4-bedroom houses for the purposes we need to and whatever. Was there any scope to, these are 2- and 3-bedroom properties, was there any scope in this development for larger houses?
Unfortunately, no. These are in the build process at the moment, but when we're purchasing other houses, as I've done earlier this week at a Cabinet Member meeting, we have been looking at converting 3 to 4 and 5-bedroom houses to meet those specific needs, because the turnover of the larger houses is very small at the moment. So although the waiting list isn't as big, the waiting time is a lot longer. So we are looking at converting properties as and when possible.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I guess just in light of Councillor Webb's concerns about being left out, I just wonder whether Councillor Ralston was also want to be consulted on the final proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Chair, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Me again, and again this is empty properties. So these are properties where they have been empty for a considerable period of time. We've gone through processes to try and get them back into occupation. We've not met with success so far, so what we're looking to do is to use the compulsory purchase powers that the council have, either to purchase the properties or, by starting with those powers, encourage the owners to bring them back into fit and proper use for occupation. So again, give the opportunity of spending some of our HRA and right to buy money in making affordable housing available to the city, unless the owners actually come back and do the work required to bring those properties up to a reasonable standard. So I would ask you to accept recommendations 2.1 to 2.4. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have the appropriate delegations on this one? Yeah, okay. Okay, so exec scrutiny considered this and resolved to note the report. Any other questions or comments on this one? In that case, we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.4. Can they be agreed? Agreed. So item 18, yet another positive story. Disposal of Alistry Hall and future operation of Alistry Park. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report sets out details of the preferred bidder who wants to purchase Alistry Hall, and also sets out the implications of their proposals on the future operations of the park and the golf course. Just to remind members that Alistry Hall is a Grade 2 star listed building. It is in poor condition and it's listed on the Historic England's Heritage at Risk Register. It's estimated that the repairs would cost in the region of £2.8 million, thus presenting a reputational and financial risk to the council. Alistry Park, as people may know, is one of the largest areas of open space in Derby. It contains both woodland and open space, and part of the park is used as a pay-and-play 18-hole golf course. The hall's location in the park has been used, in the centre of the park, has allowed it to be used to support various facilities that are used to run the golf course, the park and other services within the hall itself. The Alistry Hall was marketed and provided an opportunity for any prospective purchasers to operate the golf course if desired. 7 offers were received, and following a period of due diligence, a preferred bidder was identified. However, they do not wish to operate the golf course. The preferred bidder is proposing to convert the hall and buildings into a wedding venue and has experience in dealing with listed buildings. This is be subject to obtaining necessary planning, listing, building consent. Once that's obtained, they'll be granted a 250-year lease. Upon final completion of the purchaser scheme, this will convert it to a 999-year lease. Based on this, an indicative timeline, the council would need to provide vacant possession of the hall and ancillary buildings around September 2020. This provides an opportunity to look at the golf course provision. Golf, there's within a short distance of Alistry Golf Course, there's 11 other golf courses, thus providing a various different range of facilities. The leisure market is highly fragmented and people are choosing from a diverse range of leisure activities. Over time, this is reflected in the membership of golf clubs going down. However, this process has been turned around by where golf clubs have actually undertaken substantial investment in their facilities. The council operate or own another golf course, which is the Symphony Golf Course, which is let out or managed by Sheffield City Trust under terms of a lease for 15 years. Sheffield City Trust operate 2 or 3 other golf courses and have indicated that a golf course is sort of profitable around the £35,000 to £40,000 round, 35,000 to 40,000 rounds per year. This has been supported by other studies that we've undertaken. Alistry Golf Course is anticipated in the 1920 period to have only 18,000 rounds being sold. This is reflected in the overall performance of the golf course, which is identified that a potential loss of 1819 of 116,000 has been identified. Therefore, we have a situation where the council need to get vacant possession of, or provide vacant possession of Alistry Hall by September 2020. Therefore, the decision needs to be made on how they want to develop the golf course or how reprovision the golf course. 3 options have been identified. The first one is to continue to operate the golf course itself. Given that this would require a high degree or high level of investment in a golf course which is already losing money, it is probably not viewed as a preferred option. Therefore, the two other options, partnering with an alternative golf provider and cease operating the golf course, need to be examined. Therefore, it's proposed that a consultation exercise be launched to consult on the possible closure of the golf course, and in parallel to that, operate or run a expressions of interest exercise which will seek to any market interest who want to, or market operators who want to come forward and operate the golf course. The recommendations of the report are set out in 2.1 to 2.5. In essence, to seek approval to the disposal of the Alastair Hall, which is detail set out in the confidential version of the report, to start a consultation exercise with relevant stakeholders, undertake an expression of interest exercise, and agree if no viable proposals is received that the golf provision ceases. And finally, the report sets out a raft of delegated authorities to allow that to take place. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, John, thank you for that. In effect, we've got a report in two halves here, one in relation to the adoption of the Hall and taking up the Hall, which must surely be welcomed. One or two people, or a few people, might not welcome the consideration in relation to the golf club. Can I just clarify, you talked about the need for its vacant possession by September next year. So what timescales are you putting on this expressions of interest process? Just bearing in mind golf courses don't tend to be used so much in winter, but the running costs remain similar. So is it being dealt with urgently in respect of the expressions of interest?
Yes, we want to try and set out initial expressions of interest by the end of next month, start that exercise along with the consultation process, allowing a decision to be made early in the new year based on the outcome of those exercises.
In the absence of the golf course remaining, then the remaining options for the function of the park are numerous, I guess, but primarily the first option might be return it just to parkland.
Yes, certainly that's one of the recommendations, is that if there's no viable opportunity coming forward through the expressions of interest exercise, that the golf course be turned back into folded back into the parkland and absorbed into the rest of the park. Obviously, what happens in the future, that's subject to further investigation and discussion, but in essence that's what will be happening, and also that public access will still be maintained throughout that period.
Okay, so it seems that Councillor Webb's switched on to this one. Did you want to comment on this one? No, I'm not switched on yet, Chair. Do you want to be switched on?
Love to be, Chair. I have to declare an interest as local member in this particular one, and it's been disappointing to see. I became a member for Alastair in 1985, and we've been trying to dispose of Alastair Hall ever since then. The deterioration that's taken place over that period of time has been appalling. We've lost the ladies section from the golf course, we've lost the juniors section from the golf course, and so that is why the usage is not up in the figures that have been suggested. It's all right talking about provision of golf facilities and estimated costings in here at £1 million to £1.5 million, but there are no figures in here that would give an indication of the current usage of maintaining the parkland itself if it wasn't a golf course, and there have been suggestions locally about converting the golf course itself to extend the wildlife area at Alastair Park, which is considerable and would have considerable local support. But again, that comes at a cost. So I think we need proper cost comparisons before a decision is made on this. This will perhaps come out in the consultation process, and I'm hoping that that the people of Allestree, the people that use the golf club itself, are given proper opportunity. It's, as I say, it's taken since 1985 to reach a point like this of potential disposal. I don't want it to take that long, but I want to ensure that people are given ample opportunity to put alternative uses forward, whatever they may be.
So you've been a member of the golf club since 1985?
No, I've been a councillor in Allestree since 1980.
Councillor Barker.
Yes, unfortunately, you've ruined all my best lines. Because I was going to mention a young councillor that was there a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, quite simply, this is an answer that has been a long time coming. It may not be the most desirable outcome to sell the hall separately to the land, but it's quite obvious from in this day and age that for somebody to acquire a hall of that nature and the cost that will go along with it to put it back into usage, together with a golf course, is beyond the means of the majority of the speculators who will do that. And so really this is the best possible deal that this council can get in relation to disposal of the hall, to see it restored to a meaningful building that it is, and then we can move forward thereafter in relation to the parkland, whether it be for leisure purposes, just open leisure purposes, directed leisure purposes like golf course or whatever. And that may well be more viable from a company's perspective, somebody who runs golf courses, as it was with Simfin. We've done the same with Simfin. That went to a private company and is still run on behalf of the city. And so therefore it's not beyond our capabilities to deal with this in two separate pieces, and I would recommend to Cabinet that we do exactly what it says on the label in relation to the recommendations, and take these recommendations forward, and let's move on and see that wonderful building, which it is, restored to something like its former glory. And who knows, I don't think I shall get married again there, but I'm a bit too old in the tooth, but we might go to one or two weddings there in the future.
Councillor Ralston, are you getting married again?
You didn't say anything. It'll come as no shock to other Cabinet members that I welcome this report. In terms of the on-year costs of running this golf course, you know, in terms of the 5-year period, it's cost over £400,000 for us to keep that as part of our leisure offer. I think that there's a great deal of other alternatives that we could be using that money towards across the whole of this council. And as much as other members of our cabinet, and I'm sure many members play golf, there are many alternatives around, and I think for personally it's not a game that we should be involved in as a council. There are elements of the council far more important to be dealing with at the moment. So I welcome the report. In an ideal situation, obviously, we would have sold both. As it is, we need to just move forward and welcome the disposal of Allestree, and therefore the cost implications of maintaining that Allestree Hall. Just the hall. We're not getting rid of Allestree just yet.
So, Robin, are you into golfers? I mean, golf? Yeah.
I might be into golfers, but I don't see any point in subsidising them. But since you asked the question, no, I was on the council even earlier than Councillor Webb, and I remember trying to get rid of Allestree Hall. We are responsible for it. We own it at the moment. A Grade 2 star listed building is a huge resource call on our resources, or it should be if we were doing the job properly, and I don't think we are. Here, at long last, we have somebody willing to take it on to pay for it, which means a capital receipt. It's a long-held aspiration. We should grab it with both hands. The fact that they don't want to run the golf course is quite a separate issue, and the recommendations as they stand here, I think, are fair due process towards an end. And if it ends up as parkland, I wouldn't be upset. I think it's one of the most beautiful parks in Derby. It's perhaps one of the least known and the least visited. To make the whole thing a parkland, yes, there will be a revenue cost to that, but running a mower over some grass or allowing a bit of land to grow wild is nothing like building a new clubhouse, which is what we would be doing if we took the incredible step of deciding to subsidise golf players. And I don't think we'd get much support from our opponents, let alone from our own members, if we tried to do that. So I wholeheartedly support the recommendations 2 to 5, 2.1 to 2.5, as in the report.
So, Exec Scrutiny looked at this issue and resolved to note the report. Any other comments or questions? In that case, can we agree 2.1 to 2.5? Agreed. Item 19 then, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. This is one of your standard reports with 5 recommendations in here. It's asking for approval for a procurement exercise to have a modern and scalable care-linked service into Derby homes with 800 plus already identified and potential to scale it up for another 1,000. It's asking for some changes in the sort of procurement arrangements around the Commissioning for Change programme, especially about creating a sustainable care market with the ability for us to enter into contracts of more than 5 years and up to 20 years that will allow both innovation and sustainable provision, which in the economy at the moment I think is very important. The Derbyshire Cricket Club item is about a reprofile of the Cricket Club outstanding loan, which they've paid on time of the payments they've made already, and is secured by agreements with the English Cricket Board, so is very low risk. And finally, some welcome news about additional funding to keep on delivering the vision of our city, our river, which we know still has a funding shortfall, and getting these 2 allocations, again with appropriate matched funding, which has been secured, will help deliver that outcome quicker than if it didn't arrive. So that's the summary of what is in this report, Chair.
Thank you. Executive Scrutiny looked at this and resolved to note the report. Any questions or questions? Yes, Ruth.
Just a comment, really. I very much welcome recommendation 2.4 and 2.5, in that sort of in total we'll be getting about another £2.5 million of money from the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just concentrate on the telecare products and services and the Commissioning for Change programme? Telecare is definitely a way forward. We've had it for years. It's become even more innovative, and by upgrading the resources that we've got at Derby Homes, it will be an advantage to all our tenants. And on the Commissioning for Change, this gives an opening to the care market so that we can see what providers we've got, how good they are, and whether they meet the service requirements for 18 plus residents. So again, good news as far as my portfolio is concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Then in that case we have some recommendations, 2.1 to 2.5. Can we agree those? Item 20 we've dealt with.
You've got to read the spiel.
Item 21. Got the spiel somewhere. Where is it?
Oh, it says it on the agenda.
We need to exclude the press and public, to consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following items. That under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 and press and...
She can stay. And can stay.
Okay. Where was I? Public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Agreed?
Yes. We can just repeat it.
No.